Good afternoon. It is slightly afternoon on a cozy Sunday. I still had my earbud in. 'Tis I, Julian Greystoke, your favorite booktuber and author-tuber. I'm just gonna keep adding things to the list of things that I am definitely your favorite one of. So today I'm here in my cozy robe because, like I said, it's just a Sunday afternoon. Just a very cozy vibes today, and our internet is down, so I am going to use my phone as a hotspot and film a video today. I'm kind of low on video ideas lately, at least stuff that I'm like enthusiastic about doing. So I went back through my notebook where I have written down potential video ideas, and one of them was one I've seen other people do, although I haven't seen anyone do it for a while, and that is looking at 1-star reviews of your favorite books. Because what's more fun than watching me hurt my own feelings? So this is going to be a combination of like maybe laughing at some funny reviews and also talking about, just like different tastes and how different people get sometimes opposite things from the same book. And something that I get from a book might be the opposite of what you get from the book, and we're both right, which is so weird and confusing sometimes. Like, I've definitely had that experience where I've read a book and a friend has read a book, and one of us loved it and the other one hated it, and we were both sitting there wondering, like, how can my friend, someone I like, be so wrong? When in reality, we're both right, because that's how art works, and we just have different experiences with the same art, which is the magic of art. And, the realization that there's no such thing as a universally loved book. Every single book has 1-star reviews of it, or will have, and maybe it's so new that it doesn't yet, but it will have. So we're gonna look at some of my faves, and this might just be a really slow, kind of relaxing type of video, so put me on, get your chores ready, get your dishes, get your laundry ready, and just set me down, and we'll just look at some of the reviews of some of my favorite books. This was a little bit challenging. I went on Goodreads and I was looking at like a lot of the books that I've given 5 stars to, and a lot of them are memoirs. So I'm not going to read the 1-star reviews of those memoirs because that just feels gross. Especially since a lot of the memoirs that I read are specifically about women escaping like oppressive cults and other horrible situations. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't need to read the 1-star reviews of those. I don't. We're going to look at fiction books only. So let's go ahead and see. The first one that I found that I want to look at 1-star reviews of is The Great Alone, which is by Kristen Hanna and is the only Kristen Hanna book that I like. I have started several of her other books, and I've DNF'd them all because aside from this book, her writing style is 1000% not for me. I don't know what happened with this book. Did she just write in a wildly different style or what happened? But The Great Alone, I gave 5 stars. I loved it. I've read it like 4 times. It's one of those books, like, I usually only give 5 stars to books that I would be willing to reread or already am like champing at the bit to reread. Like, so The Great Alone was one of them. Like I said, I've read it multiple times. It is, broad strokes, the story of a young girl and her mother and father who moved to Alaska. Random thing about me, I'm low-key obsessed with Alaska and living in Alaska. I would never be able to do it myself, but I'm happy to follow fictional characters as they, like, adventure and homesteading in Alaska, because I love that idea. However, if I moved to Alaska, I would be dead in a matter of days, probably. Anyway, so it follows a young girl and her family as they move to Alaska to escape her father's debts, I believe. Her father is a very, very troubled man. He is abusive. He is an alcoholic. He has untreated PTSD and possibly some other untreated mental illnesses as well. And so this young girl is mostly left to her own devices to learn how to survive in Alaska. And we watch her kind of first when she's like 12, I think, and then into her teenage years, and then finally as an adult. The adult part of the story is relatively short and is my least favorite part. Like, there's always stuff that I'm not going to like about any book that I read, even ones that I give 5 stars. And the adult part is my least favorite part. I really, really like the longest part of the book, which is the first part, which is just her and her family when she's a young girl, just trying to heckin' survive in this cabin in Alaska, and the community that rallies up around them, some of the people in the community that her father meets that are bad for him, and sort of support his toxic thoughts and ideas. And I'm really interested in the main character's mother, too, is a really interesting character who is, I found to be a very realistic character. But anyway, let's look at some of these negative reviews. I found one already. I'm not going to read the whole reviews. I'm just going to pick up parts that I want to talk about. So I hope this video turns out to be interesting because I'm probably going to publish it. One of the complaints that this reader has is Hannah manages to make it sound like a lot of them are crazy, meaning they're residents that the main characters encounter. I doubt they are any crazier than the crazies on the lower 48. She also writes about the flip side, the community spirit. Still, if I was from Alaska, I would feel I was portrayed like a cartoon drawing. I can't really speak to that necessarily because I'm not from Alaska, but as someone who has been in some very small towns in Wisconsin, I believed these people existed fully with my whole heart. Perhaps it could be insulting, but the parts of Alaska that the main character goes to are so isolated, and it really is the part of the world where people who don't really have another place to fit go. And so there's going to be a higher preponderance of people with some ideas that are not great. They're also wonderful people. Like this reviewer mentioned, the community spirit is also highlighted, and that's definitely a positive that this book brings to the table. But I personally did not find that it made me think that everybody in Alaska is crazy. But again, reading experiences are different. This reviewer also has issues with the main character's name is Lenny, with Lenny's father. Repeatedly, Hannah writes about Vietnam vets, alcoholism, PTSD, wife beating, etc. as stereotypes. There's no honest depth to the characters except Lenny. I disagree. Reading the book makes you think that all traumatized war vets become monsters. Again, I disagree. Ernst is a total worthless human being. Whatever he was before the Vietnam War, he comes back as a monster. There's a brief nod to something a shrink once mentioned to him. Otherwise, there's zero psychological or social support. Yeah, that is true of the book. I feel like it's accurate to especially the time period and also the fact that he's a man and he moves to very, very, very rural Alaska. Why is Ernst not seeing a therapist? There you go. That's my explanation right there. It's hard enough in this time period. This book is set in the 70s, I want to say. It is hard enough in the 2020s to get men to go to therapy. And Ernst was supposed to be seeing a therapist? I very much do not think so. Instead, he chose to be a raging alcoholic and beat his wife and later his child. This was a choice, yep. Plenty of war vets make other choices even though they've been through hell. Exactly. Then the reviewer also complains about the mother character, the battered wife. I've known and worked with battered women. Most of them would have left their abusive husband over their rabbit heart. I believe the father makes Lenny eat a raw rabbit heart at one point. Most battered women will take abuse, but find the strength to leave the husband if he hurts their kids. Not all, though, this person says. And yes, I found these characters to actually be a lot deeper than I think that this reviewer is giving them credit for. I thought that the mother character was a really interesting person because she was kind of obsessed with being the one for her husband, being the one who could comfort him. She was kind of obsessed with feeling needed. And even though her husband was abusive, he also made her feel needed. He would, have these PTSD moments that weren't dangerous or violent, and she could comfort him, and that made her feel really, really fulfilled. Plus, of course, he separated her from friends and family by isolating her and taking her all the way to Alaska. I don't think the rabbit heart thing would have stopped her because, it was also part of, toughening Lenny up, and both of them kind of were we're in Alaska now, we have to really tough, which is true. So, honestly, I don't think that this book portrayed that all Vietnam veterans were the father at all. I thought it was pretty clear that it's just this guy who has barely sought out help of any kind, clearly needs therapy and treatment and possibly some medication to help him out, and he's not getting it, and he's refusing it, and he's running away from it. And once he gets to Alaska, he makes friends with people who encourage his sort of psychoses. So, I thought that all of that was very realistic. I will say that this reviewer also mentioned that this is very much just piles upon piles of bad things that can happen to characters. And yes, it definitely is. And that can get a little bit exhausting, especially toward the end of the book where you're just like, oh my goodness, can something good happen to these people, please? But also there were definitely moments of like great victory when all of these hardships piled on them and the community came together or they overcame the hardships. There's a scene with Lenny sort of near the mid to end that was really like victorious to me, and I was like, yeah, Lenny. So that was this review. Obviously, I don't really necessarily agree with the thoughts of this reviewer, but like we said, everybody gets something different out of a book. This person really loved The Nightingale, and I believe that might have been one that I started and tried to read and hated. So, it's just different taste, man. Now let's read a funny one. This reviewer says, there are a million ways to die in Alaska, in case you somehow forgot. And one of them is probably reading this pile of trite, repetitive, melodramatic, schmaltzy garbage. Tell us how you really feel. I'm here for a salty, snappy little review like that, honestly. And while those are things that I would say about all of the other Kristen Hanna books that I've read so far, somehow she managed to bamboozle me into not caring about those things in this one specifically. A lot of these 1 stars are DNFs. Personally, I don't leave a star rating anymore when I DNF. I used to a while ago, but now I don't. If I DNF it, I feel like I'll still leave a review, but I will not leave a star rating if I didn't finish the whole book. And a lot of these 1 stars are DNFs. Not that I necessarily think that their star rating would have changed if they read the whole thing, but I don't know. I just feel like to give it a star rating, I have to give it the full opportunity to get something right for me. A lot of these people who are leaving the 1-star reviews are pointing out just like how many bad things pile onto these characters. That is normally not the kind of book that I go for. Books that kind of just pile on and make the characters miserable all the time are really tough for me to read. I think like because of the setting, because it was Alaska, because we have this family who is completely unprepared for the setting that they have put themselves in, I felt it was realistic. When so many stories just pile on the misery just to pile it on, this one felt like, yeah, these are things that would definitely happen. And I felt that the author did a good job of balancing the characters' victories as well. Like these people were overcoming as well as struggling. It wasn't just misery, misery, misery. It was also victory, victory, victory. And that is what drew me personally on with this book. And finally, one last quick review from family drama to The Shining, real quick. I don't know. I think that could be fun. Let's get on to the next book, though, shall we? Now that I have thoroughly defended The Great Alone. All right, my next 5-star book, just going through my Goodreads, is All Things Wise and Wonderful, which is from the All Creatures Great and Small series. Apparently, this is All Creatures Great and Small, books 5 and 6. Compiled together. If you're not familiar, this is a slightly fictionalized memoir of a veterinarian in the Yorkshire Dales in, I believe, the 20s.
It's actually set in the 30s going into the 40s. I'm really bad at just estimating time periods off the top of my head. Always take it with a grain of salt when I estimate a time period.
In the books, his name is James Harriet. That's not his real name. And these are just like the most charming, heartwarming, wonderful stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, like all of it, all of the emotions. And I really enjoyed, especially the audiobook. But let's see what other people have to say. Let's see those 1 stars. How can you not love these charming stories? I read this as a child, -4 stars, because all I remember is the cow's uterine prolapse.
I kind of just moved on from this without commenting on this. But yes, these books are full of like well-described medical emergencies happening to animals. So, like, if that's something that you know that you can't handle, then 100% stay far, far away from these books. They are charming, they are lovely, but also they will not shy away from describing some really distressing medical issues.
This one is confusing because this person gave it a 1 star and then the review is, nice book. Every now and then a person needs a book that helps you realize and appreciate the goodness in the world. This book does just that. Plus helped cheer me up at a time when I needed it. I don't know if this person understands how the star rating system works. If this book is a 1 star, I want to see what a 5 star is for them. I think those might have been the only 1-star reviews of this book. So uterine prolapse and a person who was confused about how star ratings work. But let's go to the 2 stars and see if we can find anything fun. This person says his service, meaning Harriet's service in the RAF, is a fairly weak framing device, so overall it feels more like a short story collection where the format of each short story is pretty much the same. It is a short story collection. That's the thing, is the way that these memoirs are written, it isn't like we're used to a memoir being more of a narrative memoir nowadays, where we just like follow the person through their life mostly, and sometimes those can be rearranged for like dramatic effect, but all of these books are actually really just a series of short stories of his experiences. So they don't, aside from like big life things happening, like him getting married, him moving out, him joining the military, stuff like that, it's mostly just short stories about his different experiences in the Dales with these various animals, and especially and most importantly, the people who live there. The people who own the animals, whether they're good owners, whether they're bad owners, whether they're indifferent farmers. So this person gave it 2 stars, but is completely right that it is a collection of short stories. And another person, I'm just going to summarize their review. They are also bothered by the framing device of this book. I don't even remember the framing device of this book, but apparently there was the framing device of his time in the military, in the Air Force, and it was just used as a framing device to then bring you back into like memories of his time working as a vet. And clearly that didn't bother me. A lot of people are like, well, he didn't give enough details about the war and his experiences in the war and all of that. And I'm like, well, no, because that's not what these books are about. Like, he did not write All Things Wise and Wonderful to be about his time at the war. And also, like they mentioned, his child was born, and then chapters go by before he mentions the child again. And it's like, yep, because that's not what this book is about. So that's just kind of going to depend on what bothers you, I guess. Again, this is just going to be my mantra over and over again here, is everybody's going to have like a different experience with the book. And some people are not going to be bothered by like the framing device being just a framing device to kind of segue him into memories of the thing he really wants to talk about. And some people are going to be bothered and be like, but I want to know your war experiences. But then, if you want war experiences, maybe a different author than James Herriot. So I popped over to All Creatures Great and Small, which is the first book in the series, which I also gave 5 stars. And I'm just going to see if there's any fun reviews. This person says that they're just bored. That's not fun. A series of stories about the experiences of a veterinarian is probably not going to be for everybody, so I could see how somebody could be bored. This person begins by saying, ugh, boring, elitist, privileged, sexist, over-exaggerated, self-aggrandizing, and overly anecdotal rubbish. Overly anecdotal, yes, I will give you that, because that's kind of how this book works. All of these books work. They are, in fact, anecdotes. That's what it is. But I get it if you don't like that. I don't know. I mean, the sexist, yeah. Time period. It happens. I don't love it. It's not my favorite thing. Don't know about self-aggrandizing, because Harriet gets, like, the shit kicked out of him a lot, and people make fun of him, and he makes a lot of mistakes. Privileged and elitist. Also don't know. These people don't really have a lot of money. They're pretty poor practice. Their vehicle's always falling apart. So I don't know. I don't know where this person is getting that from. This person also says that they are not a vet or a horsey person. So, like, if you're not really into the animals that are being taken care of, these books probably just are not going to hold your interest, and that's fair. This person finishes up their review by saying, I really hope no one in my book club ever chooses any of the sequels. Hey, sometimes a book's just not for you. Just not going to speak to you as a person. That's fair. This person DNF'd at 6%, so they did not get far at all. Maybe like the first 1 or 2 stories. And they said, not at all what I expected. What's with all the stars? DNF, life is too short. I wish they said what they had expected, because I would be very curious to know what they expected from this book. This is an interesting perspective with which I thoroughly disagree, but to each their own. I can't listen to this any longer. The stories themselves are pretty good, but they are so full of swearing that it's miserable to hear. You never know when the narrator is going to burst out with a bloody hell or a damn it all. The tamest of swearing. I absolutely cannot have this on when the kids are around. Well, listen with headphones, my guy. I don't want this in my house at all. So, like, just having something with swearing in it in this person's house is too much for them. As you could probably tell if you watched my channel for any length of time, the swearing is fine by me. I will remain forever baffled by people who are bothered by just swearing. There's a lot of things that can bother me in a book or in life, but swearing, I just don't get it. I mean, that's fine. If we're hanging out in real life and you ask me not to swear around you, I'll try my darndest not to. But like, especially like, I don't even want something with swearing in it in my home. I don't know what, lest it infect my kids with swearitis. Who knows? If I had children, they would be swearing up a blue streak. Let me tell you, I would teach the kids to cuss at an early age, and everyone would hate me for it. Oh wait, I just noticed another person called this book elitist, and I don't understand. I would love to see a little bit more about why people thought this was elitist. If you are someone who thought that the tone or the characters in this book were elitist, please comment below and let me know exactly like what made you think so. All right, time to stop talking about the All Creatures Great and Small series. Let's find a different book that I love. I have a lot of 4-star books. Because for me, 4 stars is pretty high. Like 5 stars for me as a reader means like your book cured my acne and did my taxes. Like your book is amazing and I would read it again. 4 stars is still quite high for me. 4 stars still means I really, really liked this book. It's just like, it didn't change my life. How about a graphic novel called The Prince and the Dressmaker? Put simply, this is a very sweet story of a dressmaker who meets a prince, and that prince likes to dress as a woman. I think if I was to call this prince anything, it would be that they are gender fluid. Because as I recall, it's been a while since I read this, as I recall, they do not always want to be presenting as a woman, but they really, really enjoy it. So this book is just so sweet and so charming and just so heartwarming. And I'm sure lots of people have a problem with it, so I'm going to be very cautious when looking at the 1 stars here. So I'm noticing a lot of the reviews are having a problem with the fact that the setting was historical instead of pure fantasy, a purely fantasy setting. That didn't bother me at all, and I think like it's sort of a historical fantasy-esque. Like, the vibe is not the most historical thing you've ever seen. But yeah, I could see how some people might be upset that they used like a real king as the father of the prince. This person is actually upset because it's never explicitly stated that the prince is trans. Which, yeah, I think I recall that from reading it, that it's never like outright said. And the prince might not know. That's just the thing, is like it's kind of about a character sort of discovering themselves and finding out what they like and how they like to present. And like I said, I feel like for me, the prince would be like gender fluid if I was to put a label on it. But perhaps that's not necessarily true, and that might not be what some people got from it. This book is very obviously queer. And I still think that without like putting the terminology necessarily on the page, like it's on the page in abundance that this character is queer, but like what exact label is not. And like sometimes I do feel personally that it is very important to have those labels as clear as possible, but in certain books it doesn't work. Like in my book Adventurer Mage, they're in a fantasy world where they don't have the term asexual, and so I make it very, very clear from the conversations that the characters have from each other, like so abundantly clear that they are asexual and aromantic, but those words never appear in the book because they don't exist in the fantasy world. So I think there is something to be said for making it just abundantly clear, very clear, without having to use specific terminology for it if it doesn't fit in the world that you're building. And yes, in case you're wondering, there are many reviews that are just upset because of the queerness of this book and them, this book trying to force people to be okay with the lifestyle, heavy quotations on everything. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know how I feel about all of that. So it's harder to find fun 1-star reviews of that one. A lot of the books that I have given 5 stars have very, very like serious topics. So it's going to be harder to find fun 1-star reviews of those. Oh, The Velveteen Rabbit, one of my favorite childhood books, definitely got 5 stars. Who could have a problem with The Velveteen Rabbit? Let's find out. For those of you who don't know, The Velveteen Rabbit is the story of a stuffed rabbit who really is beloved of a child, and eventually the rabbit is abandoned and finds out that with enough love, toys can become real animals. So spoilers for The Velveteen Rabbit, which is such an old book. The rabbit becomes real at the end, a real rabbit. And as someone whose childhood lovey is in fact a rabbit. Like my stuffed rabbit is still upstairs right next to my bed, and I still like cuddle with him sometimes. Just so you know, I'm almost 40, and still he's very important lovey to me. As a child whose lovey was a rabbit, this story was just like, mwah, 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 mwah. You know? Yeah, what kid doesn't like to imagine that if anything happened to their stuffed toy, that it would just become real someday? But let's see who would give 1 star to the Velveteen Rabbit. And there are a decent number of 1 stars for this. This person says, this book scarred me for my goddamn life. I still can't get rid of a stuffed animal. Do you have any idea how many stuffed animals live in my basement because of this book? See, I don't remember that being so much of a message, because the rabbit got to be a real rabbit at the end. Like, even though he was abandoned, he got to be a real rabbit. He was sad there for a minute, because that's how stories work. Like, the characters do have to be sad for a minute, but then he got to be a real rabbit. Now, maybe it's been a long time since I read this book. Maybe it was a metaphor for the rabbit dying and going to heaven or something, but it didn't scar me. It left me feeling very hopeful. Honestly, if there's anything responsible for me still keeping some toys that I just do not want anymore, it is Toy Story, not the Velveteen Rabbit. Yeah, this person says, I found this horribly traumatic when I was small because the message I got was that all of my toys were self-aware and completely and utterly doomed if I did not love them well enough. I had no idea how to do that, but I knew I had to try. And I still felt vaguely guilty about it in my teens. This person does point out that there was a very traumatizing scene in this book, which did upset me as a child. Not enough to stop reading this book. I was kind of into some dark media as a little kid. Like, fun fact, when we were, my brother and I were very young children, my father decided that really no movie or topic should be like off limits in fiction for us kids. So we watched movies that children probably should not have watched. And strangely enough, I came out of it like shockingly fine. I don't know if that I would advise that for any other kids besides us, but we came out of it shockingly fine. Like, I watched things like Alien and Saving Private Ryan and like deeply traumatizing or adult themed movies when I was a kid. And like the dark themes, like, we'd pause the movie and we talk about the themes and we talk about what was happening and we talk about what it meant and how it made us feel. So, like, there's a scene in The Velveteen Rabbit where a lot of the toys get burned, and that is a very distressing scene. But I don't know, I think maybe just, like, my parents had uniquely set me up to be able to handle that dark theme pretty well. Like, the literally only movie that scarred me as a child that I still have not rewatched from the first time I saw it is E.T. I watched so many movies that were inappropriate for someone of my age, and E.T. is the only one that I, like, will not rewatch. So, I don't know if that might tell you the sort of child that I was to set me up to find The Velveteen Rabbit to be, like, an uplifting and not scarring book. Which is hilarious because I think that a lot of people might have the impression of me, because I write a lot of cozy books, because I write a lot of happy endings, that I am very sunny and not dark at all. But I'm actually kind of the opposite. I just choose to write happy and uplifting things because I just don't like to wallow in the sad stuff. Like, I can handle it, guys. My life has not been sunshine and roses. I just don't like to revel in that. This person said, countless years of guilt about neglecting my own childhood bunny, who I still have. Shout out to you, Rabby. I'm a nerd and maybe sort of unbalanced. I think I'm unbalanced in the other direction. So me and this review are together. You know, high five. So yeah, The Velveteen Rabbit, scarring for people, seems to be mostly the sentiment about the 1-star reviews there. Somehow I came out of it not scarred. Not sure how even. All right, The Hobbit. The Hobbit was one of my very first absolute favorite books as a young person that I read over and over and over again obsessively. I used to read The Hobbit, and then as soon as I got to the end, I'd flip that book back around and start again. I have my copy of The Hobbit upstairs. It is in tatters. I think the front cover is replaced with duct tape. Like, that's how beat up that paperback copy of The Hobbit is. So, obviously, you could say that is one of my favorites of all time. I understand that the story is incredibly simple and it was meant for children, but actually, that's one of the things that I like about it. Every now and then, I just need something simple and comforting. I'm going to read a couple of 1-stars that are from friends of mine on Goodreads. Like, not personal friends, just people that are on my friends list on Goodreads. Fun fact, you can be on my friends list on Goodreads. I friend anybody. who wants to over there. Really? So this person says, in certain crowds, my rating and the words I'm about to write while type would probably get me shot. But The Hobbit is still one of the most boring books I have ever read. Tolkien's writing seems so dry and impersonal, though I can't deny it had a lot of fascinating ideas. It also makes me wonder, because it's old-fashioned fantasy, and normally I don't like that. I think the only way that The Hobbit got grandfathered in is because I read it so much as a kid. The appropriate age to be reading The Hobbit, like 10 years old, that's like the right age. So that's how it got grandfathered in. I don't know about boring, but I could definitely see, because it is in that very old style that normally now as an adult I do not like, and I do find boring, how people would not be engaged by this book. I also wonder, there's no romance in it. And I think that might have been one of the things that I liked about it as a child, is that I didn't have to worry about there being a romance in it. So many books, even as a middle grade reader, so many books were like romance, romance, romance. And even though I'm not aromantic, I am asexual. And so like that feeling of like, you're inevitably going to have to be in a romantic and eventually potentially sexual relationship because all your books say so, is exhausting. It's exhausting. So a book like The Hobbit that's just about a little guy going on adventures, 10 out of 10, I relate so hard to Bilbo Baggins, you have no idea. I am Bilbo Baggins. Thank you very much. I will go on adventures and I will succeed mightily, but at the same time I'm going to hate every minute and complain constantly. Well, this person clearly is not a Hobbit because like I said, I am Bilbo Baggins. This book is terrible. The jokes weren't funny. The villains weren't good ones. Whenever it tries to make Bilbo relatable, it just fails. And they finish by saying this book was ass. This person does say that they read it young in 9th grade, and I am a firm believer that any book you are forced to read, you're not going to have a good experience with. Being homeschooled, there were very few books that I was forced to read. I was allowed to have pretty much completely interest-led reading as a child for my fiction. Obviously, I still had school books to read, like history and science and all that stuff. But like for my fiction reading, I was never forced to read any of the books that most children in school are forced to read. And as a result, like I could enjoy things like The Hobbit because no one was making me read it. Making people read a book is one of the most surefire ways to make people hate the book. When I did do a correspondence high school course, because I'm old enough that we didn't really have internet courses, at least that my family could afford to access with our shitty internet. So I did a correspondence high school course, and I was forced to read Wuthering Heights. Guess what? I hate Wuthering Heights, and I will never read it again. Like, I hate it with every fiber of my being. And you know what? If I had come to it on my own, maybe I might have gotten to like it. But because I was forced to read it, hate.
Hate, 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 hate. Double hate.
I'm going to read a little bit of this person's review because it's actually not really a review of The Hobbit. They just are kind of mad about The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit in general, including the movies. So this is just funny. The only Tolkien I've ever read, and it guarantees it'll stay that way. That's right, I'm one of the 5 people on the planet who didn't pretend to have read the Lord of the Rings trilogy after the movies came out. And that's using the term loosely. They weren't really movies, they were more like a protracted masturbatory fantasies for stoner geeks and people who would otherwise be making B-horror film remakes. I think you may be in the wrong place. This is a review of The Hobbit, not of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but also I think you just might not like fantasy movies, because those are like the quintessential fantasy movies. So maybe just fantasy movies aren't for you? Just a thought. Just a thought. Maybe just, you don't have to watch every movie. Another person who was forced to read this book in class, again, if you're forced to read a book, this person says, the old white men in my comments can suck my dick. Fair. I'm not one of those. I'm an old white lady, I guess, so they say, I hate this book. No, I despise this book. This book is going to on my top 10 most hated books of all time. I don't think this book is awful, but I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The writing is so dull, and the amount of telling instead of showing infuriates me. That is the old writing style. And I agree. 99.99% of the time, I hate it too. I am a showing aficionado. I love books that show rather than telling. Some people it doesn't bother so much. Some people are like, give me a book that's all telling. I don't care. Not me though. Not me though. And that's one of the reasons that I struggled with Lord of the Rings when I read it or attempted to read it later when I was, I think, about 12 or 15. I can't remember. One of those ages, still young teens. I read, and I got through the first book and halfway through the second, and I gave up because I did not like the writing style and I was bored. But again, like many people, The Hobbit got grandfathered in because I read it when I was a kid at the appropriate age for reading The Hobbit. I've been reading this in class for 2 months and I still hate it. The amount of times I've been told to dissect the deeper meaning in Tolkien's dry-ass writing and explain why Tolkien did this, I'm so done with this book. Trying to dissect this children's book, you can do it, whatever, if that makes you happy, but don't. Like, nothing makes a person hate a book more than being forced to read it and then dissect it. No. I don't blame this person for not liking this book. And they finish with, after their scathing review, they finish with, I don't need to appreciate this book. Correct. That is correct. You don't need to love The Hobbit just because other people do love The Hobbit. And any obnoxious people who are telling you that you just don't get it, or this book is not deep. I'm sorry for anybody who's going to be arguing with me in my comments and being like, you just didn't understand. This book is not deep and you can fight me. Sometimes books are just fun and enjoyable adventures for 12-year-old Julian, all right? So 12-year-old Julian rated this 5 stars and I left it there for her, all right? And I think if I read it now, I'd still enjoy it because, nostalgia. This was like such a formative book for me. So, but that does not mean that everybody else has to love it. And I could totally get, especially if you're being forced to read it. Oh my God, why are we forcing people to read The Hobbit? Legitimately. If Tolkien was alive today, I think he would be baffled that people are being forced to read and dissect The Hobbit in school. See, this person also just isn't a Hobbit themselves, I don't think. They said, I didn't understand the whole Hobbit character anyway. One second he's a brave little guy who wants to save the dwarves, and the next he's wishing he was back home. That's how adventures go for me. Like I said, you take me on an adventure and I will thrive. But I will hate every single moment of it. I'd want to be home, sitting on my couch, sipping my tea. Oh, P.S. What's with the random outbursts of songs on every other page? It's like High School Musical. Okay, there I'm a little bit mad. How dare you come for the songs? I like songs in fantasy books, and you can fight me. I know it's not the thing anymore. Modern fantasy books aren't doing it anymore, but a lot of the fantasy books that I grew up with had songs in them, had poems in them, had like different, like sort of a mixed media in that way. And I loved that. And so as a result, in many of my fantasy stories, I go out of my way to put in a song because of that, as tribute to some of these formative books of my youth. And you can pry my fantasy book songs from my cold, dead grasp. And how dare you compare it to High School Musical of all things? There we must differ, my friend. There the argument must be made that you are wrong. All right, let's see if we can find one more 5-star book that I can be incensed about, and then I think that will be enough for this video. If you like it, we could do more. Or not. I don't know I have no idea if people are going to like this, or if you're going to be bored out of your mind and have already stopped listening. I also gave 5 stars to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for the same reason as I did The Hobbit. I enjoyed it when I was a child. I'm not going to look at that one because I think it's too similar. I think we're going to get too similar of sentiments from those 1-star reviews as I did with The Hobbit. All right, I think the last book we're going to look at is Terrier, the first book in the Becca Cooper series, which is my favorite series by Tamara Pierce, who's one of my favorite authors. Now, keep in mind that while I love Tamara Pierce and her style, and especially her female lead characters who always manage to have a lot of personality and strength without ever being the special, except Alana. Alana kind of is the special. A lot of these characters are just so well fleshed out and human, and so I love them, but I don't love every single one of her books. I actually did not like the Trickster series at all. I had a lot of problems with it. But the Becca Cooper series, chef's kisses left, right, and center, and so let's look at what people have to say about the first book in that series. By the way, the Becca Cooper series very loosely is about a young woman, Becca Cooper, who is basically becoming a fantasy cop. She is fantasy cop Judy Hopps. So not a rabbit. And fun fact about me, I love fantasy police stories. Police in real life, but police in fantasy stories, don't ask me why. It's something that I love. Yes, I also really enjoy the Terry Pratchett Watch stories as well. For that same reason, fantasy cops. It's just a thing, okay? Leave me alone. Anyway, Becca Cooper is a young woman who is learning to be a fantasy policewoman and solving crimes, and like the crimes are actually like the lesser part of these stories. They're really kind of just like about her and her life and her friendships and her very real feeling friendships and her experiences. And yes, there's also plenty of action and danger and crime, but they're not really mystery stories, even though they kind of are set up to be. So I can kind of see how that would confuse some people. And the first reviewer did say that. They're like, we're told that she's like supposed to be solving the mystery of missing children, but then that's really not the focus of the book. And I can totally understand that that would bother people, because these really aren't necessarily like mystery crime stories in a fantasy setting. We really are here to follow specifically Becca Cooper through her life. And that's what I am also here for. So, your mileage is going to vary with this series, but I love it. This person says that despite this book's size and length, there's zero world building. I don't know why this is the case. There are plenty of opportunities to put in some world history, but we practically got none. I disagree. I feel like there's just enough world building in this book. I feel like this book also follows my general rule for world building, which is if the characters don't know about it, need it, or want to learn about it, it's probably not important to the story. And because the story is such a close and personal one to the main character and her life, I think it follows that rule and it does fine. There was never a point where I felt like I didn't understand the world while reading these books. But if you're the kind of fantasy reader who really wants to know more sort of extemporaneous stuff about the world that the character is in, this book might not be for you, and my fantasy books might not be either. This person says, I don't get why people like this. It's horrible. It's a diary written by what seems to be a 12-year-old. I mean, come on. I mean, Becca starts out very young in this series. I don't know. I don't think she's 12 in the first book, but she might be. So, the fact that it sounds like a person her age, I don't think is bad. This person only got about 30 pages in, and again, I take with a grain of salt the 1-star review of anybody who especially didn't get more than 30 pages. That's not very far. As this person says, as is often the case with Goodreads recommendations, I'm not the right audience for this book. That's fair. This is some sort of boring middle grade book about a rookie cop named Becca Cooper, but in her world, cops are called dogs and rookies are called puppies. Dumb, DNF at 14%. Fair enough. So yeah, unfortunately there's not too many funny reviews. Most of the people who are giving it 1 star said that it was boring. And that's fair. I find that if I like a character or characters, which I love the main characters of these books, that a slow mover doesn't bother me. I will read a slow book if I am invested in the characters. And I was in the Becca Cooper series, so I didn't even notice if it was slow. Everybody's saying it was slow and boring, and I'm like, if you say so, it was not my experience. So if you like a really, really character-driven story and don't mind if the plot isn't going 1,000 miles an hour, I think this series could be for you. Again, if you like fantasy. If you don't like fantasy, probably not. And if you're one of those people who likes a more old-fashioned type of fantasy that's really deep and heavy on all of the world building, even the stuff we don't need, then these books probably also aren't for you. But that's a high point. That's one of the reasons I like them so much. They are for a younger audience, and I am not even really into young adult books as much anymore, and definitely not middle grade, and these still were really fun for me to read as an adult. So if you and I have similar taste in books, you might like these. Or if you like my books, you might like these. Or if you like these, you might like my books. Just saying. However, the covers are terrible. The covers are atrocious. Do not be fooled by the covers. I think there might be better covers out now, but the OG covers, awful. Awful, awful, awful. I don't know who made these covers. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to do for this book now. I've got some laundry going that you can probably hear. I have other chores I want to get done today, but thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this was fun. As I mentioned a couple of times, I am also an author, so you can check out my books. I have mostly fantasy books, although I do have a supernatural thriller novella, which might be pacey enough to keep your interest. It's not going to be slow. So check them out if that interests you. If you enjoyed this, feel free to let me know that you'd like to see more of it. I could also do the reverse, where I read 5-star reviews of my most hated books. I don't know, though. I feel like that could be less fun or funny, but maybe it could be fully entertaining. Who knows? So let me know if that's something you would like down in the comments below. Also, let me know if you have any really funny reviews of some of your most beloved books. Let me know. Or did you just hate The Hobbit because you were forced to read it? Oh, let's talk in the comments about books that you were forced to read. Do you agree with me that if you're forced to read a book, you're much more likely to dislike it? Or were you one of those people who was like forced to read in school and actually really liked all of the books? I want to know. Leave it in the comments below. But anyway, that's all I've got going on today. I'll see you next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye.
I couldn't do this without you, Garrus.
Sure you could. Not as stylishly, of course.
You know who helps me do everything stylishly? My patrons. Patrons like Moon Island, Corey, Ashley, Bunny, Nemo the Sorcerer, Tactical Hot Dog, Haley History Nerd, Stephanie, Pixelizzy, Rhea, Christina, Cameron, Lady Kragan, Jose, Lunar Muse, AJ, Marshy, Semi-Dark, GK, Scout, Annika, Jen, Gay Tutter, Tina, Black Nunga, SB Boots, Martha Baggins, July, Bird Anonymous, Sarah, Kat, 78 kilograms of shade, Ingrid, Roma, Haley, Sam, Kira, Kohikaro, Mooney, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, Mufflier, Celia, Deborah, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Merween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Vampire Antihero, The Oracle of Shelfi, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, and Amanda. Thanks so much for always having my back, everybody.